Father's Day is coming up, and our friends at Ridge are running their huge annual Father's Day sale. Whether you're shopping for your father, your husband, your brother, or even yourself, use my link ridge.com/AA-run to get up to 40% off your favorite items site-wide. Ridge's slim black leather wallet has been my daily carry for a long time now. It holds my cards, it holds my cash. That is all I need. I don't want anything more in my pocket than I have to have, which is why I try not to carry keys, but when I do, I use Ridge's slim key case. Check out Ridge's hottest new color for Father's Day, High Dive Blue. For those with MagSafe phones, check out Ridge's new line of MagSafe compatible wallets. Ridge's MagSafe wallets use strong magnets to securely attach to any MagSafe compatible phone. And if you already have a Ridge wallet, you can swap out the outer plate and turn it into a MagSafe wallet. One of the best ways to support this channel is by supporting our sponsors. So don't forget to use my custom link, ridge.com/AA-run. Hi, everyone. Yesterday was a crazy day, and we are here to talk about what happened with Literally Michael. Regular viewers of this channel will know Michael as Serge Del Mar's husband. Yesterday was the first day of the Occupy L. Ron Hubbard event, the Occupy L. Ron Hubbard Way event, the month-long event organized by DOA. And we knew Scientology was going to pull out all the stops, and it was going to be crazy town. Last night was absolutely insane. And never mind the fact that this morning, the police have already showed up a whole bunch of times and are telling the protesters they don't have a right to be there. So this whole thing is a huge developing event, but we have to talk what happened about, we have to talk about what happened last night when Michael was arrested following an incident with an officer. Michael and Serge could both use a lot of support today. This is Michael's channel. If you're not yet subscribed to Michael, please go check him out and support him any way that you can. Michael is almost certainly, he went to the hospital, and then he's currently in custody. He is almost certainly going to need help with bail. He's almost certainly going to need help with lawyers' fees, because I don't see the LAPD letting this one go. The LAPD hate the Scientology protesters. They've shown that they are working with Scientology every step of the way, and I do not believe they're going to let this one go. You can see Serge did a video last night. He's done some videos this morning. Please support both Michael and Serge every way that you can. We are going to review some footage this morning. Primarily, Hollywood Aja got the absolute best footage, the best vantage point of what occurred. We are also going to look at the footage directly from Michael's live stream. And here to discuss all of this with me today is one of my fantastic moderators and also retired Florida law enforcement officer, Lori Plays. You can find her channel right there. And without any further ado, Lori.
Afternoon, Aaron.
We've never done a video together before. This is amazing. Okay, so you've already reviewed this footage. Can you tell the audience what your experience as a Florida, I said retired, but I haven't described, where were you a law enforcement officer? How long were you a law enforcement officer? How long have you been retired now?
Sure. I started in 1988 at a small police department within Hillsborough County, which is just outside of Tampa, or Tampa is within Hillsborough County. I was there a little over 6 years, but really wanted to experience more, wanted more opportunity for growth, to do different kinds of work within law enforcement. So I eventually applied and was hired by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, again, it houses Tampa. So it's a pretty large area. And I had 24 years total in law enforcement. I had a serious injury that took me out for a year. Worked my way back in, but it was a kind of injury. It broke my neck. It was a kind of injury that with time and age kind of brings on other issues that are not helpful for you in this line of work. So I eventually got a line of duty disability retirement and got to see my kids more often in their middle school and high school year ages. So I within law enforcement, mostly patrol, but I was a DUI investigator for several years before I started having children. I was a community policing officer, which meant it was a sweet gig, Monday through Friday, weekends off, holidays off. and you concentrated on your assigned area, developing personal relationships with those living within the area, so that, you know, they have somebody that they can come to without having to just call, get a dispatch of a stranger. It builds rapport between law enforcement and the community. And that was really what I enjoyed most in my career.
Okay, great. All right, so we have this footage. This is that what's that music?
That's my clock chiming the top of the hour. I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Just want to make sure it wasn't a ringing phone or whatever.
No.
Okay. So this next footage, how long will the music go on for?
It's finishing right now. So sorry. I didn't even think about that.
I'm sure it's bothering me in my ear more than it's bothering the viewers. Okay. Okay, the footage that we're about to view, this is from Hollywood Aj's channel. Let's take a look at it on this vantage point. Here we go. Okay. Oh, I see. Let's have oh, geez, Louise. Okay. I'm trying to get the curse words off the screen. All right, here we go. Wait, that's not what? Why is that not? Okay.
Don't worry about someone parking the red. There's actual crimes out there. Come on. No. There's no thank you very much. There's actual.
Okay, that is literally Michael that you can see on screen there, just behind the officer with his phone in his hand.
Crimes out there. Real people doing drugs.
Okay, as you saw, police officer initiated physical contact with Michael for a reason that's not terribly obvious to me.
Hey, you. Oh, no.
Okay, and I'm just going to turn the audio on this off for a second. He tries, look, here, I'm going to go back for a moment. He does try to trip Michael. Okay, right here. He does try to trip Michael to the ground right here, and he couldn't. He didn't have the leverage, and at that point, the officer himself actually falls down. So let's go back a little bit. Okay. Now, again, they're chit-chatting. Michael does not touch him. The officer's walking away, but he pushes him anyway. Okay. And that's it. In the footage that I saw, Michael never actually gets taken to the ground. He stays standing in that position. They grab his wrists. They walk him to wherever they walk in. They put him in cuffs, and they arrest him. Okay, let's look at it from Michael's vantage point. And let's see how this looks.
There are kids locked up in here. Hey, don't touch me. Don't touch me.
Okay, I'm going to rewind it a little bit. Okay.
Get back in there. Back in there.
Yeah. There are kids.
Thank you very much.
There are kids locked up in here.
Now, look, for the record, it looks like Michael touches the officer right there. He does not. You don't have the advantage of depth perception right there. From Aj's vantage point, it's clear he doesn't make contact with the officer there. It looks like he touches his back, but he doesn't.
There are kids.
Right there.
There are kids locked up in here. Hey, don't touch me.
Okay.
Don't touch me.
All right. So the reason that I wanted to have this conversation with you is because I'm sure people are going to have their own opinions just based on emotion and what they feel is right or wrong as to how, you know, what responses should or shouldn't be. But what really matters, in my opinion, for this conversation is what the rules are, what the laws are, what are the rules that the police have to abide by. And since you would know the answers to those questions, I really want to know what your opinion is on this. So if we start looking if we take it from Aj's perspective here, and I'm just going to go through this step by step. So right there is where it looks like he touched the officer, but he actually didn't. Okay, so what is your thoughts on that right there? As a law enforcement officer, what's going on there? Is that justified contact by the officer?
My assumption is he's trying to put some space between himself and Michael, but there's no reason to. Michael's not being aggressive towards him or anything, and he seemed to have no problem when Aja was that close to him, and he seemed to be enjoying the conversation from Aja. So there's really no reason, in my opinion, for the cop to put his hands on Michael at that point. He could stop and say, if he was concerned, please step back, you're encroaching in my space. But to put his hands on him and push him back, I don't see any reason to do that. And it looked to me like the touch from Michael was absolutely 100% reactionary. And it was very slight because, as soon as he's pushed back, he touches the officer's shoulder with a slight forward motion and says, don't touch me. So it's very slight. And to call that battery, first off, don't ever put your hands on a police officer. Be safe and don't put your hands on a police officer. But that movement from Michael was so slight that it's almost embarrassing. And the way the officer went after him like a bull was, in my opinion, completely and absolutely excessive. He's trying to take Michael to the ground, as you mentioned, with trying to trip him. He's trying to put him face down on the ground to cuff him, but Michael's not fighting. So there's no reason at all to take the suspect to the ground. They have him in control with holding his wrists. They can cuff him from that position. There's zero reason to take him to the ground.
Right. Now, my question, just as a layman, my observation here, when the officer does that, I'm thinking to myself, the officer's already walking away from Michael. There's no reason for him to turn around and push Michael away. Michael's not being aggressive. The police officers, they're in a situation where there's a crowd of people. Like, honestly, is that just, I'm not even trying to imply that, like, I just don't know what rules the police have to abide by. Like, he's already walking away from Michael. Why turn around and push him away? Is that permitted contact, in your opinion?
I can't say that it's not permitted, but I see no reason for it. And there's no guidelines in the agency that I worked for that says don't put your hands on someone. I will say, however, though, anytime you put your hands on someone, you can expect some sort of response, or at least it's not unlikely to have some sort of response. And like you say, I'm not going to suggest it, but part of me has to wonder if there was some thought of retaliation so that arrest could be made, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I guess it is like talking about two different things here of like, what are they legally allowed to do and what was the right thing to do? Like, if the cop felt that Michael was getting too close, he could have easily said, please give me space and step back. But when you put your hands on someone in a situation that's not necessary, that feels like escalation and not de-escalation.
Exactly.
And I guess one question I have for you on that is, what are police trained on? What do they tell you on the subject of de-escalation? Is it supposed to be a priority for officers on patrol?
Absolutely. We get into fights a lot. And even though we're likely going to win, we're probably going to go home bruised up and aching and kind of hurting. Nobody wants that. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want the person I'm dealing with to be hurt. So I'm going to try to avoid any kind of physical contact at all costs. And like you said, like I previously said, there was no reason to just not stop and say, you need to step back, at least give me arm's length between you and I. Don't follow me so closely for your safety and for my own safety. There's no reason why he couldn't have just done that as opposed to putting hands on Michael. And I would say if Michael hadn't touched him back, he would have had a very good case, I think, for, if not actual battery from the officer, at least a valid internal affairs complaint against him for putting hands on him unnecessarily.
Right. Okay. The next piece of this I'd like to pick your brain about is your thoughts, your understanding of what rules kick into play from the officer's side of it once Michael touches the officer's shoulder. And I'm not talking about the rightness or the wrongness of whether Michael should have done that, but what kicks into here, the next part right there, boom. Now I got to tell you, I watched this a dozen times. It took me a dozen times watching it to actually realize that Michael happened to make contact with his shoulder while the officer was in the middle of a step. And even though Michael's contact was very light, you can actually see that the officer was slightly thrown off balance. His left arm, his left elbow gets thrown out a little bit to adjust for his balance. And it occurred to me that that might have triggered a little, fight or flight in the officer. I mean, I'm just, just literally telling you what's going through my mind as I'm watching this. So, see, look, the officer actually gets slightly thrown off balance. Even you see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, I think he's got his right foot forward, and because his left foot was up, it put him over maybe an inch. But that reaction was totally excessive. There's no reason to put that much physical aggravation into taking a suspect into custody if you intend to make an arrest.
And so my question to you is, does the law care about that being an way too aggressive, or does the law go, once you touch that cop, the law doesn't care what happens next? What's your opinion?
Well, I think it's definitely information for a defense attorney to take into court with them. It may even show that the officer was looking for action with Michael. Now, I did pull up California statutes as far as battery touching a law enforcement officer. Self-defense is an element that they bring up as a valid argument that to claim that they did not batter. Accidental, that wasn't an accidental contact. Excessive force. Now, normally when we think excessive force, we think of when law enforcement are taking a suspect into custody and they're literally beating the crap out of them. That's what we think of when we think of excessive force. But was it excessive force to put hands on somebody when putting hands on somebody wasn't necessary? I would definitely have a defense attorney look into that. But there are elements of the crime that have to be looked at. The defendant willfully and unlawfully touched a peace officer. Is it willfully when it's obviously reactionary? Willfully indicates that it's a planned, thought out thing to do. I'm going to push that guy. And that's not what happened. It was 100% reactionary. Right. A police officer was engaged in performance of their duties. That's accurate. The touching was done without the officer's consent. That's accurate. But I would go back to that willfully and unlawfully, because it was obviously.
Correct me if I'm wrong. And again, I'm just a layman saying what's going through my head. The opposite of willfully would be accidentally. And like saying I did it because it was a reaction and it didn't involve thought is different than saying it was a total accident. It was unintentional contact. It was, what do they call it when unintentional incidental contact? As a law enforcement officer, when you hear willfully, is that the opposite of accidental, or does it also include it was a reflex, it happened too fast?
I don't think it's necessarily the opposite, because reactionary instinct. An example, accidental would be the case with Nancy Drew in Chicago. Did she intend to hit Chadwick with a body part? Right. No, that was incidental contact. Accidental contact is often referred to as incidental contact. You walk by somebody and your arms bump. Did that guy try to slam, shoulder slam me, or did they just accidentally bump up against me when passing? That's accidental. Willful is intentionally, and I don't see an instinctual reaction as being necessarily willful. In my opinion, I'm not a lawyer in Florida or California.
So, any charge that has been brought against any of the protesters to date has just been dropped up until now. Yeah. I'm going to be surprised if this one gets dropped. I feel like the LAPD hate the I feel like the LAPD hate the protesters. I feel like the LAPD is working with Scientology. I feel like the prosecutors, now I realize it's not the LAPD who chooses to prosecute, right? It's the prosecutor, right?
Exactly.
And so in your professional opinion, what would you expect to see happen with this?
Obviously, LAPD is going to insist that it get at least to the DA's office. And honestly, the DA does not have to prosecute just because LA is pushing for it. They can look at it and say, well, why did your officer put your hands on him first? What was their reasoning for that? If they feel like there was no reason for that, they may believe that it's just an exchange of contact with what Michael did. So they might not necessarily file. If they do file, I don't think Michael will be convicted because of the other things we've seen in this video.
I want to bring up this comment here because this is something I myself was going to bring up. Michael has said that his father was an abusive LAPD officer and his defensive action is legit, I feel. This is one of those things where I personally feel that way, but I wanted to make sure that in this interview and in my coverage of this, that I'm focusing as much on how the police and the prosecutors are supposed to look at things. Because to me, I go, yeah, first of all, he barely touched the officer.
Right.
He touched the officer as much as the officer touched him. No one was in any threat. The officer was never in any threat. Michael was never in any threat from the officer. It was a little tit for tat. And given the fact that Michael has this in his background, he has this in his childhood. His father was an LAPD officer and was physically abusive to him and emotionally abusive to him. And then you have these officers who are treating the protesters like scum, who are doing the job of a human trafficking cult, who Michael's husband was raised in as a child slave. And there's an emotional component here. I just don't know if prosecutors care about things like that, or if the police officers care about things like that. And that's why I'm that's kind of what I'm focusing on, is making sure I'm not just covering it from my emotional feelings. But, I agree with this statement that I agree that I guess there's a difference between where something is justifiable and whether it's legally justifiable. And because I don't know what is legally justifiable, I'm trying to give equal time to both sides of it. So I don't know. What do you think about this?
I think that that's definitely something that's going to be brought up if Michael goes to trial. And that's another reason why I think he would not be convicted. Not that that's an excuse to go hands-on with law enforcement anytime the opportunity presents itself. That's not a get out of jail free pass. But it builds a story as to why the reaction was the way it was. And had it been it's reactionary. If somebody pushes you, to give them a shove back. It's just human nature. It's a defensive mechanism. But Michael touched him so lightly that's why I feel like it's going to show that there was no intent in there to batter that officer.
Right. I'll tell you, one of the things that makes me go and one of the things that makes me feel that common sense is very often divorced from what the actual rules and regulations are.
Right.
And, what happened to Nancy Drew it was Chicago, right?
Right.
What happened to Nancy Drew, where I've watched those videos so many times, I can't even tell where the physical contact occurred. So a Scientology staff member who was out power washing chalk on the sidewalk claims that Nancy Drew bumped him with a boob.
Right.
And I've looked for the video. I cannot even tell where the contact occurred. And if it occurred, it wasn't something that threw the guy off balance. It wasn't something that was confrontational. It was accidental, incidental, whatever you want to call it. And yet the police put her in cuffs and arrested her and took her downtown. And she is, and at first the charges, I'm running the risk of misstating the facts here. At first the charges were dropped, but then Scientology refiled them. And it's like, whatever we saw happen here with Michael was more contact than whatever occurred between Nancy Drew and that staff member. And that's why I go, I look at what happened here and I go, that should be nothing. But I thought the Nancy Drew thing should be nothing as well. And it's something, you know what I mean?
Yeah. The Nancy Drew thing was an absolute violation of authority. It just never should have happened. This one, I will tell you, if I were in the position of that LAPD cop and somebody had given my shoulder that slight shove, I would have turned to them and said, don't ever put your hands on a cop. If you touch me in any way again, I will arrest you. I would not have tried to linebacker tackle them down onto the ground face first and put cuffs on them. It was so it's so incidental. I mean, it's not so slight as to be incidental contact, but the reaction was just natural human nature. It was very slight contact. It was obvious that it was not in an intent to cause him any harm. Right. So to react to the contact the way that cop did was shameful. That to me is excessive.
Well, that's good to hear. Actually, the question I wanted to ask, but it sounds so stupid to ask it, is the police officer allowed to take into consideration that there was no intent to cause harm? Or are the rules kind of black and white where it's like, no, once you make contact, you've made contact? So you're saying the officer absolutely was within his discretion to go, hey, now look.
Yes.
You cannot be touching me.
Right. No, there's nothing that says if you might have a violation of the law, you must arrest. That doesn't exist. Officer discretion is a huge part of our job. Huge part. So it was his choice, that cop's choice to react the way he did. Not policy. That was his choice.
That makes sense. Okay, there are some questions and comments we should take up. Don Perisseau, I heard Michael's being charged with a misdemeanor. Well, thank God, because I mean, Street said he was almost sure this was going to be a felony. So thank goodness.
There has to be some sort of injury for it to be a felony, or bad enough that injury could likely result.
Got it. Anna says DOA is a hero. Michael is a hero. Surge is a hero. Absolutely. We have Sir Crepitus. Lori, I don't know if you know this, but Sir Crepitus is also retired law enforcement officer from California. He and I are probably going to be doing another chat about this. In addition, thank you so much, Sir Crepitus, for the gifted channel memberships. Appreciate it. SPIT Clearwater. My good friend Kai and one of my wonderful moderators. It's Lori Plays. Amazing. Love to see it. Yeah, this is awesome. We got Nerd Report in the chat. Good to see you, Nerd Report. Oh my God. Down the rabbit hole news. I thought it was an ice cream truck. I thought the music was actually an ice cream truck as well.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, let's see. Miss B and Seth D says prior to start of clip, he tells cop they're behind. I feel like this is referring to he tells the cop, we're behind you. I think this is the clip that you were talking to me about before we went live. You said there was a time just like 30 seconds beforehand where someone basically said to the police, okay, we're gonna follow behind you so that you don't have to worry about what's happening behind you. But I
said for officer safety, we're right behind you. Just be aware.
That's right. And we're not even sure who said that. Actually, we can't actually clearly tell who's saying that, but somebody did say that. And let's be honest, those cops aren't afraid. And here's how we know they're not afraid. They know that these protesters have been out there for a year. It's been a year now since Streets started this whole movement. And never once has there been an incident of a protester starting any physical conflict whatsoever. Just not even once. So, and the cops get 100 phone calls a day. They understand that these protesters are nonviolent. No one's out there shoving officers, you know. Christian B, thank you for the gifted channel membership. I really appreciate that. Max's mom says the female cop totally looked like she was trying to remove the aggressive cop from Michael. Yeah, that is true. I've heard that a lot. Marilyn Hone, good to see you, Marilyn. Another one of my fantastic moderators. Okay, so this question is for you, Lori. Any thoughts on the absence of body cams on the officers?
I don't know, because I don't know what LAPD's policy is on body cams. But I thought that they were all issued body cams. Were they not wearing them at all, or were they not turning them on?
I'll tell you what, as soon as those two officers, what happened is those two officers showed up with their sergeant. And Streets was immediately on them and said, "Where's your body cams? Where's your body cams? Where's your body cams?" And he went right to the sergeant and said, "Sergeant, are these officers on patrol?" And so the Street said, "Okay, I am documenting right here that you are failing to enforce." He said, "This is LAPD policy. This is city policy. If you are on patrol, you need to have your body cams." And that's the conversation that happened literally 60 seconds before this altercation occurred.
Wow.
Of course, it's the officer without a body cam. Now, but does it really matter when you've got 10 people live streaming you? I don't know.
Yeah, but that's our evidence. That's showing what we're doing. He's supposed to be doing that not only to protect himself and the department and the city, but also the people around him. That's if they have them and they're required to wear them when they're on duty, and it sounds like that's the case from what William is saying, then he's violating policy by not wearing his camera.
Okay. Miss B and Seth D says the cops are black PR'd regarding the protests. He knew his story. Oh, yeah. Okay. Anne Chatrine M. Is that Norway? Is that the Norwegian flag? I might be close there. The PD looked at the Scientology camera in the Nance Drew incident. Oh, so, okay. So somehow the Scientology footage showed a different angle than all the protester footage. Okay. That is good to know. Tommy Tone Toontown. I don't know about the US, but here in Canada, our use of force had to be reasonable and justifiable considering the totality of the circumstances. Here, this would result in the suspension of the sergeant. Wow. Sir Crepitus says that sergeant was angry and he lost his temper. The sergeant felt there was contempt for him. That is called contempt of cop, and it is not a legal term. The officers, or was it a sergeant? The sergeant's response, his immediate and rageful and over-the-top response does show that he lost his temper. Because just like you said, he could have turned around and said, hey, do not touch me. That is right. I mean, he didn't have to go full-blown linebacker on him.
Yeah, and Sir Crepitus could probably back me up on this, but in law enforcement, there's something called a POP arrest. It's called pissing off police.
Oh.
So when you talk about discretion, if a cop is just angry and somebody gives them any reason, they're likely to arrest him just because they got ticked off. So I think that's what this was, honestly.
Yeah. Blake Reed. Good to have you in here, Blake. In my opinion, any amount of excessive force used by that cop is premeditated because it's always his first response to escalation. It's all this dude is thinking about doing. He did the same thing to Laura. Wow. And eventually, God, is that guy really the sergeant? Huh. Casey Cat says, interesting that aggressive cop was not wearing his body cam, even though it was required. Yeah. SP says, was the cop that pushed Michael the same one that pushed Laura and Danny at La Poubelle? I personally don't know. Do you know, Lori?
I don't know. I heard about a cop pushing Laura, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. All right. So I want to once again show Michael's channel. You can find him. If you just search Michael, obviously you'll never find it. But if you search his handle at LiterallyMichael, you can't miss it. Please go show Michael all the support that you can. And also Michael's husband, Serge Del Mar. Obviously, Michael's not going live right now, but Serge is going live. And guys, the Occupy L. Ron Hubbard Way event, it is currently being threatened by the LAPD. The LAPD showed up today to inform DOA that they had to vacate the easement on Fountain Avenue. They had to move to the south side of Fountain, and DOA made it clear he ain't going anywhere. He said, I'll chain myself to this tree. You guys can cut me off and arrest me. So we are going to see what happens. But, Scientology is being everything they are doing right now is just to mess with the protesters.
Right.
And it's just to piss the LAPD off as much as possible. And I can tell you, you'd think that someone over there in Scientology land would be going, maybe we should not piss off the LAPD. And I promise you, Miscavige is going there, is sitting back there issuing all the orders saying, F the LAPD. They work for us. we're the ones in charge here. We're the most ethical group of beings in this sector of the Galactic Confederacy. You know, they work for us. We make the rules. We call the shots. So, you know, honestly, the LAPD needs to understand that they are being used as tools. They are being used as a weapon, as a weaponized arm, a weaponized force acting on behalf of Scientology. And the fact is, I know that they know this. I know that they know this. I feel like they are willingly working with Scientology to create an environment that is as unsafe as possible for the protesters. So, you know, whether anyone thinks Michael should or should not have touched that cop, you know, we are here for him. We are going to support him every step of the way.
Absolutely.
We're going to make sure he has everything he needs to have all the best representation possible. And so I'll show this one more time on Serge's, Michael's YouTube profile. You can see the links. He's got Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, anyone who can spare a few dollars to send to him for his legal fund. It's better to send it to him directly than it is to send it through super chats or anything, because YouTube takes 30% of super chats. So, okay. Kate Taylor says, for Michael, or prayers for Michael, I served 6 years in the Army and would have gotten an Article 15 for that behavior. We were trained to respect civilians and do our best to stay in good favor. Well, there you go.
Yep.
And let me see. Confident Chris's Finger says his name is Julian Lobo, Rampart Division. Okay. And Joni Cummings says it is illegal to threaten the protesters. That's good to know. All right, guys. That is all we have on this for now. Lori, it's been an honor to have you on with me for the first time.
Sir. I appreciate you inviting me.
Let's do it again. Well, and actually, Lori's local, so one of these days, not too long, we're going to come in here and do a chat here in the studio.
I look forward to it.
All right, guys. Thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you, as always, to everyone who watches until the very end, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.